Let me show you an even simpler example of this. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. I'm just holding down my space bar to move down a little bit. And I'm going to go and import that graphic one more time. So I'm going to go File, then down to Place, and I'll grab my Galaxy JPEG and place it onto my Illustrator page here. There it is, very lovely. And I'm going to keep this incredibly simple, just to make sure that you have this concept down. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and make sure that your fill and your stroke are set the same as mine. So I have that basic gradient set for my fill color. Go ahead into your swatches palette and choose that gradient swatch if you need to. And then I'll click and drag a rectangle here. So now I have something like this happening. I'll grab my black arrow tool, marquee around both the cookie cutter and the dough. Now, I don't want to grab any extra shapes. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more careful when I select here. You only want the dough and the cookie cutter, no other shapes. I've got them both selected. I'll go back into the transparency palette menu and click on Make Opacity Mask, and I get this effect happening. How cool is that? Isn't that awesome? Isn't that cool? Now, let me show you some other cool things that you can do with your opacity masks here. Now, this is all going to be inside my transparency palette here, so you might want to pull this guy over from the side if he's still over there. We have all kinds of options available inside our transparency palette. First of all, let me show you this clip here. If I uncheck clip, what that does is that shows me the rest of the JPEG, the rest of the graphic that falls outside of the cookie cutter. So in other words, it's sort of like seeing the dough on the other side of the cookie cutter, if you will. So I can turn that on to clip away or to mask that extra graphic, or I can show it, but I still have my gradient masking effect happening here. So you can use that for some neat effects if you like. The other thing that I can do is I can invert the mask. So if I choose invert mask, now what happens is my colors flip. So in other words, rather than hiding areas that are filled with black, areas that are filled with white now hide. So I'm just simply inverting that mask there. It's pretty cool. All right, what else can you do? Well, we're just getting started here. I can single click on this mask thumbnail here in my transparency palette. That isolates the mask, my cookie cutter, and I can use my black arrow tool here if I want. I can go and make some changes here if I want. I can even do things like rotate it. Or if I really wanted to, I could go into my transform commands here and begin reflecting, or go into my transform each, or whatever I want here. I can do whatever I want to this mask that my heart desires. So again, I've isolated just the mask itself. Now, what's more, I still have that gradient fill showing up in the bottom of my toolbox. Now check this out. I'm going to grab my gradient tool here. You saw this in a previous lesson. And what I'm going to do is click and drag a new gradient. And that adjusts my opacity mask. So again, I can get all kinds of neat, interesting effects. Now where this gets really cool is on text, which you saw earlier, and we're going to do some more text effects in just a moment here. But just to give you a sense here, how did I get in here? Well, I clicked on my little thumbnail, my little mask thumbnail here in my transparency palette, and you saw I had the move tool, and I was able to rotate and resize and do all kinds of wonderful things to my mask. And with my mask still selected, I could go to my gradient tool and then essentially redraw or readjust the gradient inside the mask. To get out of the mask mode, all I have to do is click back on my artwork thumbnail, and now I'm back into regular old Illustrator. I grab my black arrow tool. Now this is treated as one single object. I could scale the entire object or rotate the entire object, but I haven't isolated that mask there. Again, to do that, I have to double click on the mask thumbnail. Now, here's something else I can do. I could single click and then go and manipulate my mask if I wanted to. You've already seen that. The other thing that I could do is I could hold down the Alt key on the PC or Option on the Mac and click on this mask thumbnail. And now I've isolated just the mask itself. I can see the fill. I can see how the gradation is happening. And check this out. See my stroke here? I happen to have a stroke on my masking object. In fact, what I'll do is I'm going to go and crank up the weight of that stroke. It's a black stroke, so what do you think is going to happen back in my artwork? Check this out. Hides it. Unless I go invert. And now I get this sort of bordering effect happening. Isn't that cool? Looks like something I might hang on my wall maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so you can do all kinds of neat things. Single click gets you into the mask. Click back on your artwork, hold down Alt, and click on your mask. It gets you into the actual mask where you can see your fill and stroke properties, and you can go nuts with it. Again, you can use your Move tool to rotate and size, or use your Transform tools to come up with whatever transformations and creations you'd like. So as you can see, opacity masks are pretty cool. Now, they get even better here. I'm going to go back to my artwork here, so make sure you're back on your artwork thumbnail there. Just click on it in your transparency palette there. And I just want to make sure that we're all at the same spot. So make sure you're back here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my Alt key or Option on the Mac, and I'm going to single click on my mask here. That hides everything except my mask. And you saw earlier that I can make changes here and do all kinds of fun stuff to my mask. But what I haven't shown you is how to add extra objects, additional objects to your mask. So you can use whatever tool you'd like in your toolbox, and you can make this as complex or as simple as you'd like. I'll do something like this, and then I'll grab my Move tool just by hitting V on my keyboard, and I'll Alt drag or Option drag out a copy, something like this. While you're adding in extra shapes, or text by the way, take a look at your thumbnail back in your transparency palette, and you can see it's updating there. So check this out. I'm going to single click back on my artwork thumbnail, and sure enough, my opacity mask updates right away. Pretty cool stuff, pretty cool.